John McClane's having another rough Christmas. Die Hard 2 Die Harder doesn't quite have the prestige of the original film, but we're going to dive in and see what works and what doesn't. Will Holly's plane land? Will John master the fax machine? Only one way we're going to find out. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Story of my life.
This is a movie podcast, and we are working through Die Hard season. This is week 2, therefore we're discussing today Die Hard 2 Die Harder. Possibly the best sequel subtitle in the history of cinema, frankly.
I'm still in a toss-up with Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, but it's definitely up there.
See, here's the thing. If Die Hard was a new thing just now, and they called Die Hard 2 Die Harder, they wouldn't have called it Die Hard 2 Die Harder. They would just call it Die Harder, because they think sounds fancy. That makes it worse. What makes it good is Die Hard 2 Die Harder. You have to have the full thing. That's what makes it work.
I will say, though, in at least my copy of the movie, it didn't ever actually say Die Harder. Was that a added-in post-marketing sort of thing?
I'm trying to remember. I want to say it changes from Die Hard 2 to Die Harder. Like, it doesn't come up at the same time. It does like a transition to Die Harder.
I was waiting for Die Harder in mind, and I never got it. So maybe I just had a different version.
I wasn't paying attention for it, because usually, like, the title's coming up, it's time to look at the phone for a second before I settle in. And
yeah. No, I get you. I understand. I'm just saying.
I wasn't expecting to be quizzed on the opening title.
Quick, what's the license plate on the car in the first scene?
Mother-in-law. That's the license plate says. Yes, we'll start spoiler-free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get the spoilers, and of course, if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, do hit us with a like button. It does help us out a bunch. And of course, you can get bonus content from me and David, some bonus shows over on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about them at the end of the episode. So, last week, we heaped praise all over Die Hard. I was coming in as a long-time fan. You were coming in as someone who'd dabbled around it, but never quite fully given in to Die Hard. But now you have.
I've done some taste testing, but I've fully indulged myself in the Die Hard now.
Yes. So we're here for the sequel. A sequel that often gets brought up when people talk about... I think when you think of the archetype of a sequel that tries to recapture what the first one did, and maybe, for better and worse, examine what works about it and what doesn't, I feel like Die Hard 2 is this benchmark that's brought up a lot when talking about other sequels and how successful they are. Do they feel like a rehash? Do they feel like they advance things? Do they feel like they're just treading water? For whatever reason, Die Hard 2, whether you feel really positive or more on the negative side about it, it feels like it does get used by everyone as it's this type of sequel, and this is the sort of thing that this modern sequel perhaps is either done better than Die Hard 2 or done worse than Die Hard 2.
The way you're phrasing it, it makes it sound like it's just the perfect midpoint of better and worse. It's just that exact little like, oh, well, that's the benchmark. You hit that, and that's where you need to be.
Yeah, I mean, to get into feelings on Die Hard 2, I would say that Die Hard 2 is a very watchable sequel to Die Hard, but is inferior in just about every way. It's nice to see John McClane again. He's still exciting to watch. There's a couple of great set pieces, which I do quite like, and I will say that it has maybe the best yippee-ki-yay in the entire franchise. So give it points for that. But it has worse pacing, it has a worse script, it has a worse villain, it has a worse setting. Not that the setting's a bad idea, but I just don't think they use it as well as the building was used in Die Hard 1. So, yeah, normally I make you answer first, but I found myself stumbling into it, so there we are. So, I like Die Hard 2 well enough, right? I don't want to sound negative. I enjoy watching Die Hard 2, but it is only a decent movie that's maybe elevated by the fact that Bruce Willis is really good at being John McClane, so you can still lose yourself in the fun of it a bit.
Yeah, I metaphor I would use for it is, this is the guy who had to come on after Martin Luther King gave the I Have a Dream speech. Like, they nailed it so hard that then this one had to come up and be like, all right, how do we follow that up? And no matter what they were going to do, it was probably going to be inferior unless they just, like, absolutely caught lightning in a bottle twice. But no, I share pretty much all your same sentiments. I think what really stood out to me is I was praising the last movie on just how tight the script was, how the pacing of it was just masterful, and all of these little setup and payoffs just felt so natural, so easily worked into the script. It didn't feel like they were going out of their way to do anything at all. This one, I could feel a few times they were going pretty far out of their way to be like, oh, hey, we're setting up this news person character so that later on we have the news chopper. Like, there's nothing else in between there that would justify them existing except for that. And there's a few other smaller examples, but it was a lot more tweaking, I think, could have gone on to the script here. The setting, as you were saying, Nakatomi Plaza was absolutely mapped out. It was 100% like, you know exactly how this building is by the end of the movie. I do not have that for Dulles Airport. I do not have any idea where air traffic control is in relation to the landing fields, where this the building that the villains are at is in reference to anything else, despite them literally laying out a map and showing me where it's in reference to. So yeah, it's just lesser on everything, but much like you, I don't want to sound overly negative. I had fun. Like, I was cracking smiles. Like, they had all the same one-liners. John McClane was literally just a one-liner machine the whole way through.
Yeah, and you could argue almost to a fault that they've almost went too heavy on it, but I can't deny that when he loses his badge in the luggage area where it's all moving about and the cop says, "Where's your ID?" and he looks for it and goes, "On its way to Cleveland?"
Yeah.
That's a funny line.
Yeah, it's good. It's fine. As long as you go into it wanting fun, it's fine. There are a few points where it might cross the line depending on who you are, but I would say at best for me, it flirted with it. It never entirely jumped over the line. So positive in general, but much lesser than Die Hard 1.
Yeah. I think, and I don't want to be negative on the actor here, because I actually really like William Sadler as an actor. He's a character actor who pops up in a lot of things, and he has done for like probably 3 decades of my life, just in different things. Most recently, in a sort of small memorable role, he was the president in the MCU for a little bit. That was a little role he had. And like,
I don't even remember him for that, but all right.
Yeah, he was. I can't even remember what movie, but maybe it was Iron Man 3, I want to say. But regardless, he's one of those guys that's popped up in so many movies. He's in like Shawshank, Green Mile, and like all the Frank Darabont movies that people know, the Stephen King adaptations. He's got a role in all of those. He's a very dependable actor. But he's playing the main villain in this movie. Now, without looking, tell me the name of the villain in this movie.
Colonel.
He is a colonel, that's true. He's Colonel Stewart, apparently. But I couldn't have told you that either without looking. And that's first problem is I just think the villain is like, even the way he's introduced is this over the top. He's sinister. He's and for some reason he like aims his TV remote like a gun, and like a little moment that's supposed to be tense, but it's just stupid and weird. And why is he naked? And it's like they're going over the top. And I think what stuck out to me the most thinking about it this time, especially given that we talked really in depth about Die Hard 1 last week, is that the villains in this are what the villains in Die Hard 1 were making fun of. In Die Hard 1, Hans Gruber goes out of his way to be like, oh, we'll make them think that we're these terrorists who have some cause and we want to free these prisoners. Like, that's the joke at one point, is he sends the police on a goose chase saying, hey, I want to free this political prisoner from this country, and like the other terrorists are like, who's that? Like, and that's the joke. This movie is literally about freeing a political prisoner who's been extradited. And to be honest, if you ask me to explain the exact ins and outs of who this guy is, where he's been extradited to or from, and what his backstory is, I couldn't tell you, because they shotgun blast it in one news report at the start of the movie, and it's actually so complex relative to actually be able to take in the information that it's just, oh, he's a bad guy, he get into cocaine smuggling, and he's got a lot of supporters who want to like free him, but he's been extradited. But I actually couldn't tell you right now. I'm assuming he's been extradited to the US because he's coming to a US airport, but that's only because the plane's coming here. I could not have told you that from the exposition at the start of the movie.
I mean, I could have told you the basics of the general guy. My main issue came down to why the hell our villain wanted anything to do with them. At one point, he spouts the line of saying like, oh, something, he was a force against communism. And I'm like, and is that it? Is that your motivation? He's against okay, good, I guess. But like, I couldn't, the rest of everything else that happened, I just had to blankly assume, okay, you just see an opportunity in this guy and you like what he's doing. Fine, whatever.
Honestly, the politics of the villain in this is so weird, because my response to that line is like, well, in my experience, America generally is pretty against communism. I guess maybe you think that they've gotten soft on it, but you kind of have to tell me that. You have to really hammer that home.
The news report is hammering on to Reagan's war on drugs and saying, like, the war on drugs got its first prisoner of today. It's like, okay, well, that's direct, like, that's all against anti-communist stuff. So I don't know what the hell you're going for, movie. Yeah. And honestly, that's kind of what the first movie, you always had a very solid idea as to what all the pieces were in the story. And the tension came from the idea that you didn't know, like, when the knowledge that the audience already knows would become apparent to the characters. That was always the thing that was driving the tension. Here, it is twists and turns and reveals to the audience itself. We don't know all the information until John McClane knows the information, and honestly, then it gets unveiled.
In some cases, I would say the characters in the movie have information before we understand it, and that is honestly a little bit frustrating at points. So yeah, it's not as tight as a script, and the villain is just written to be so cliched that it has no chance of getting close to Hans Gruber. And I like the actor even. So it's not him that's the problem. Now, is he as good as Alan Rickman would be? I don't know if I'd say that, but like, I do like him, you know, like, so, but this is easily like the least I like him in something, because I like him in so many other things more than I like him in this. So
yeah, I mean, I know you haven't either seen the movie or care about the movie, but Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, he played Death in that, and he's just a hoot. I love him in that.
I've seen the first one.
He's in the second one.
He's in the second one. I've definitely seen like a clip of that, I want to say, because I feel like I've seen that. But yeah, I think it's very important. It's very clear in this movie how important Hans Gruber was to be making the movie like a two-hander between John McClane and the villain. And then arguably to an extent, you also had Al in the first movie, who is in this briefly. He gets a little cameo, but he's not here. And all the attempts at doing little side characters in this one to be endearing, I think mostly all fall flat. There's like a janitor character who's kind of quirky, and I hate him. I hate that character.
Dude, I blinked and I missed how the janitor got introduced, and then he never went away. Like, they didn't do anything to establish, like, here's why he's important. All of a sudden, he's just talking to this janitor character, and they're just best friends now.
Yeah, and every time McClane would come back after being away for a little bit, he'd show up next to where this janitor's office is in this massive airport. Yeah, very strange. I think the other big thing, for all the little things that I think people would rightfully argue that this movie tries to recapture and maybe shouldn't have done, like too many like sort of like moments it tries to do. This is Die Hard 2's version of this moment or this idea. There's maybe a little bit too much of that. The one thing they don't stick to from Die Hard 1, which I think is the mistake, is that there's far too much in this movie of John McClane being able to sort of go back and talk to everyone else who's involved in the situation. It'd be like if in the first movie, every 20 minutes, John McClane came out of the building to talk to Al face to face and like sort of reconvene with everyone and then went back inside. That's what this movie feels like, because he's not on his own for extended periods of time. And it does, and to me, that almost makes it feel less like a Die Hard movie, because as much as Die Hard with a Vengeance, but we're not got to yet, but as much as that's set in an entire city and he's driving around and doing all that stuff, once that plot's set up, he is, well, it's actually a buddy cop thing. He's with Samuel L. Jackson. But once they're on their own, and it feels like they're having to deal with all this shit and think on their feet. But so much of this movie is John going back to the other characters who are involved in making decisions and arguing with them, and that feels less Die Hard to me.
Honestly, that was something that, obviously, for the plot to work, you just need to accept. But there is probably like 4 different times that chain of command gets pulled in this movie, where they're like, oh, you know, you got a cop, you got air traffic controller, you got the military eventually, you got all this different chain of command stuff. And yet it felt like every single time that John McClane walked into a room, there was a character who's like, yeah, screw those guys. I want to talk to you. You know what's going on. And then just gave him all of the information he would need for the next like 4 scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, so we talked a lot in the last movie about how like John McClane took things seriously, and all the other characters who thought they were hot shots ended up being fools or getting killed because they thought, you know, like, and the line we pointed out at one point was the lieutenant character in the first movie when they were surrendering in the SWAT team, he just gave the order over the comms, kick ass. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's how juvenile he's been with this. He thinks he's a badass. He thinks they're about to win, because how could they stand up against the might of the LAPD SWAT team, right? The character in this that John butts head with the most, which is the head of the airport police, he butts head with him the whole movie, and we're not in spoilers yet, but just, there's a point, unsurprisingly, late on in the movie, where he finally kind of believes what John McClane's saying and sort of says, okay, I need to take this seriously now. After he makes that transition from, I'm going to stop trying to, like, get in John's way and not listen to him, the thing that he says to go into the third act, now that he's actually on John's side, is, let's kick ass. And I'm like, it's like you missed the point of the first movie. What are you doing? Like that...
Yeah, that's fair. I was wondering the point you were going to make with that, and I agree with the one you made. I think that it is, like, yeah, you're falling into the tropes that the first one was calling out as being stupid. Yes. I will say, though, that I like the way that this movie does take certain expectations that you have from Die Hard and does actually... It works it into that sort of reveal structure that's going on. Specifically, the idea of who do you trust in this situation? Who are the people who... up top are going to be able to work with you and are going to be against you, and they subvert that in a few different ways over the course of the movie, but I like the way that it kept me on my toes by the end of it.
Yeah, that's fair. So, shout out about director and cast here. Renny Harlin is directing, who before this did Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, which is a pretty solid sequel, to be honest, in that franchise. Okay. He's went on to do a couple of fun movies. I actually really like Deep Blue Sea. You know, he's done. He's kind of this dependable director that they go to in Hollywood for like different sequels and sort of genre movies, and he's done some crud though. I mean, I don't know if anything he's done basically once we get into like to the 2000s and beyond. Because
I was gonna say, how was Exorcist the beginning?
Not good, Bob. Not good.
Fair enough.
And I've not heard good things about that Strangers movie that he did. I've not seen it yet, but I will be on streams, don't worry. There'll be a Strangers Part 1 review coming early next year.
Well, considering his upcoming films also include Strangers Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, I'm a little concerned. I'm also deeply concerned. So it's weird to say that this is during his peak and his golden era. It maybe says something about him as a director, that this is kind of, I mean, this isn't his best by any means. I think Deep Blue Sea is a more fun movie, but definitely, yeah, he had a ceiling, and this is not that far off what that ceiling was, all things considered. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out what he did that earned him this spot. I guess it would have been Nightmare on Elm Street, because nothing else before that seems hyper relevant to anything else that he had done prior.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine that he was cheap, because they wanted to get Die Hard 2 out as quickly as possible, 2 years after the first one. They whip up a script that feels a bit rushed. They get a director who comes in cheap, but he did deliver a studio movie that was on time and on budget, so hey, you can do it. And then because this is a moderate success, I assume, he then gets a bit more leeway going forward, I assume. Yeah. So
I mean, his IMDb trivia says he is the most successful Finnish film director in the history of Hollywood. It's a very narrow category, but he nailed it.
Yeah, he's actually from Spain, but he always finishes his films. That's why they call him a Finnish director.
Clever.
Anyway, so obviously we got Bruce Willis. We don't really need to mention him here in the rundown.
We actually had quite a bit of recurring cast, more than I thought.
Yeah, don't get used to that. Because with the next one, all of the recurring cast are gone.
I figured it was too good to last. Like, honestly, at a certain point, especially watching this movie, it kind of would have felt cheap if they had brought back Dickless for a third movie. Like, there's no way you could have justified that.
It'd have been tough. It's funny though, because like his inclusion. So obviously we're talking about William Atherton as Thornburg, the journalist from the first one. His inclusion is probably one of the biggest like eye-rolling coincidences of the whole thing. But to be honest, that subplot is one of the more entertaining comedy beats of the whole thing. So it's hard to really be mad at it. So
yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where on a tighter script, I think I would have liked it more. But it is at least doing something rather than just having Holly's character be completely devoid of anything else going on.
Here's the thing, right? As much as you can argue that it is like a cheap way of like, oh, we have to have all the characters back, so this is what he's going to be doing, and putting them in the same place as Holly on the plane is funny because she punched him at the end of the last movie, and they get some material out of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it works because all my problems with the script aren't really anything that's on the plane. Everything that's on the plane is fine. I don't think you need to change any of that. All the stuff that I think needs reworked is like how John McClane interacts with the airport people and how the action progresses from one set piece to the next. Like all that's what I think needs to be completely revamped, and the villain's motivations maybe also need a bit of a touch up. The subplot on the plane is fine. Like, you know, these are everything that's going on is put the planes in jeopardy. Holly's on one of the planes, and because we already like her from the first movie and it's John's wife, we care about someone on the plane, so it gives us stakes. And that's the purpose of it. And if you have a bit of comedy up there. So it's obviously we also have Bonnie Bedelia back as Holly on the plane. To quote another line from the Die Hard song, "No one dies harder than John McClane, even when his wife's stuck on a plane."
I like how I'm never gonna be able to listen to this song on like camera on season here, but I'm gonna get the entire song from you over the course of it.
I mean, they made the song before the fifth movie, so after you've done the fourth one, you can listen to it to your heart's content.
Fair enough.
So yeah, she's back. We mentioned Al's got a cameo. William Sadler, as we said, plays the main villain. The I don't know, Esperanza, the guy that he's trying to free the prisoner who's getting transported via plane.
General, whatever guy that is, the cocaine guy.
Yeah. That's actually a pretty big actor. That's Franco Nero, who was the original Django.
Okay. All right. I was going to say, I know I recognized him. It wasn't from the original Django, but I do have a few things in his filmography that I did recognize, and that's mainly because he has 234 listed roles.
Oh, yeah. Back in those early days when he was making movies in Italy, he was churning those bad boys out. That's very much a thing. He had a cameo in Django Unchained as well, actually.
Right, yeah. I remember that being one of the trivia bits of him spelling or saying how to pronounce Django, and he's like, yeah, I know.
So we got that. Head of airport police is Dennis Franz as Lorenzo. I guess the trick with this character is they thought, oh, well, we'll give him an Al who hates his guts, right? So it's going to be like Al, but he doesn't like him. He's the opposition in this movie.
Yeah, it's kind of the swapping of the lieutenant and Al in a lot of ways, because you also get an airport worker who is kind of his Al for this movie in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, the janitor's more his Argyle, bizarrely.
Yeah.
Which, okay. That would have been really forced if they try to fit Argyle into this somehow.
Oh, God. To be fair, there's at the very beginning end of the movie when everything's just getting started, he goes over to a different janitor and says like, hey, you got a key for this door? Go get the cops. I was like locked in on that character. I was like, this guy, he's going to be important. Never seen again.
He's going to come back somehow. Because we haven't really mentioned, but this one's set in Washington during the Christmas period. Obviously, the airport. John's there to pick up Holly from a plane, and I think the idea. I do like the idea that the first three Die Hard movies take place in L.A., Washington D.C., and New York. It's a really nice little trilogy of locations. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway,
I mean, I don't know what the. I know you said the fifth one's in Russia. I'm trying to figure out where the fourth one would go if we kept with major cities.
I think it's back in Washington in the fourth one.
That's lame.
I could be wrong, but I feel like it was. It's just, because we actually get snow and wintry sort of weather this time. There's actually some funny, I remember on the extras and the old DVDs and whatnot. I'm sure they're still there, because my iTunes version of this has all the extras, I think, where they talk about, like, some of the stuff they shot with real snow because they were shooting some stuff in like a location that had snow, but some stuff they were shooting in like a place in LA or something like that. So there's like a funny story about how they tried to transport like a truck of snow from a different part of the country, but when it arrived, because they'd kept it cold, it just turned into a big block of ice.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, yeah, just some of the perils of movie making.
I suppose it would have been even more egg on their face if it had all melted. Like, someone would have to crack the joke of, like, you guys didn't keep the snow refrigerated? What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, it turns out transporting lots of snow is actually quite difficult, and, maintaining the fact that it's snow.
Why can't we just go back to the good old days where it was asbestos and you didn't have to worry about it?
Well, I think that's the thing. I think by this point they realised asbestos was pretty bad for you, so we should be using that. I mean, there's obviously a few other faces here to mention. The head of air traffic control, or well, not air, I mean, the tower. The guy in this particular tower is Fred Thompson as Trudeau. Yeah, too. I think I recognize from a couple of things, but nothing.
Yeah, he seemed familiar. Top credited role was Hunt for Red October.
Yeah, that sounds right. That kind of era. Yeah. So there's actually 3 different actors just that are red shirts on the bad guys team that stick out to me as recognizable.
Okay.
So there's Don Harvey, who he was in the Deuce. That's why I remember him as sort of in his like older part of his career. But like he's popped up in a few things. I just saw him in Creepshow 2, like a couple of months ago for streams. So he's just one of those faces that pops up. The other ones that are a bit bigger is that one of them is Robert Patrick, i.e. the T-1000. Did you notice him?
I did know. He was the guy who's posing as the painter that stopped the... Yeah, I thought he looked familiar.
He has one line of dialogue, and it's "sit and duck." And then John Leguizamo, I'll just say Leguizamo, I can't pronounce it.
Yes.
He was also one of the random bad guys.
I didn't catch him, but
honestly,
sure he was around.
He's got a hat on. It is hard to catch him, but I did notice him and thought, wait, is that him? And then confirmed it by looking it up. So,
all right.
Yeah, just a few random faces that you might recognize during Die Hard 2 before they did their bigger things. This is a year before Terminator 2. It's only 3 years before Super Mario Brothers.
Which, of course, was the biggest role of his career.
Damn straight.
Yeah. That's something I did want to mention in terms of like writing as well, is that while the red shirts on Hans Gruber's team obviously were still red shirts, we didn't like have a lot of names for them or anything. I did still feel like there was identifiable characters there.
They were memorable. Yeah, right. Because at the very least, there's the doorman, there's the hacker, there's Candy Guy. There's obviously the angry long-haired one, his brother who goes first. There's the Tony Soprano kind of looking. That's Soprano. Montana. That's what I might say.
Yes.
That's Soprano. I mean, mobster is yes, but different look. Right. There's like a good handful that stick out as memorable. Not all of them, to be fair, but a reasonable amount of them.
Yeah, but like in this one, as much as they have recognizable actors, if you told me like, okay, how many did they have on the team to start? How many died in any given scene? I couldn't have told you. Yeah,
I mean, not the way I get spoilers, but a lot of them, there's still a lot of them around in the third act. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very, very strange. Do you know what? I'm looking at Luigi's credits here, and straight up, his first big role in a big movie probably is Mario Brothers. Because I'm looking at everything between Die Hard 2 and that, and nothing's sticking out. So...
I don't expect him to have had a big role beforehand. I was saying that Super Mario Brothers being his peak of his entire career is... a little bit disingenuous.
I was being facetious.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Honestly, though, I'm not sure what I would pick as the peak of his career. He never really was a leading man. I don't know what I would say is his big break.
Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
See, you've not made a compelling argument for anything else in his career yet.
Look, I know that it's not your cup of tea, but I have a soft spot for Moulin Rouge.
See in that?
He is in that. He's a pretty decent sized role in that.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
And obviously came around to John Wick a few times.
He did pop up in John Wick. That's a very minor role. I wouldn't call that his movie, you know?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Yeah, so, okay. All right, so, yes. Do I just say spoilers and get into things?
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't want to get back into the score debate that we had last time of like Christmas music and whatnot, so we'll just drop that. Go ahead.
But you did recognize a lot of the same score, though, right?
I recognized the score, but then, like, at the very same time, it didn't do, like, any Christmas music right up until the end, and then they decided, like, well, we gotta end it with the same song.
Yeah?
So,
okay.
Just what I noticed. I have no comments on it, just what I noticed.
All right, spoilers for Die Hard 2. Not that it'll be something most people are worried about getting spoiled, but it's always nice to do it for anyone who happens to be, sort of, you know, just hasn't happened to have seen it and wants to jump into it. So
the me's of yesterday.
Yes. Oh, that's right, because this is your first viewing, Die Hard 2. That's interesting.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, it's Christmas, about 2 years after the first one, assuming that real time has passed, and I'm assuming it has because they do make heavy reference to it being the 90s now early on. So
God, I love the fact that they are going all in on the technology of the 90s. And they list off all the cool stuff that will never be outdated.
Yeah, because she lists off fax machines, earphones, and I'm like, oh my god, this sounds like geriatric technology now.
I know, it's so good. Like there's major plot things over the point that there are phones on the airplanes, and John McClane's like, what sort of crazy technology is this, Holly? You're calling from a phone on a plane?
Yeah, because he literally answers, because he gets paged, which, by the way, the pager even sticks out as a relic of the time, but he finally gets to a payphone, and he phones the number that he got paged with, and it's Holly, and he's like, wait, did you land already? And she's like, no, John, there's phones on planes now, honey.
If this were a lesser movie, I would almost expect that scene to be like a product placement for some phone brand. Where it's like, why no, silly? I'm calling from the new Nokia.
Did Nokia exist in 1990?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, 1990 flat, I don't know. The 90s as a whole, definitely Nokia's
yeah, but
period.
by the end of the 90s, I remember the Nokia phones being a thing, but I'm just, did they exist before mobile phones became a comment? I don't know.
Probably. All I'm getting are, do I want to buy a Nokia phone? Which, no.
Wait, do they still exist?
Yeah, no, they're still making stuff.
Okay, fair enough. News to me.
Oh my god, stop telling me all this stuff. I don't know. No, wait, there we go. First one, 1982. It was a car phone. Yeah.
Oh, they were doing car phones. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big brick ones with the... Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Everything had to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And they decided to start with the car.
Yes, there you go. So, yeah, that's a big plot point early on, is that John is a fuddy-duddy and doesn't really want to learn to use new technology. And it kind of comes up a couple times. He has to send a fax at one point, and he just doesn't... He's like, it's upside down, and the lady who's doing the fax for him at the airport's like, it doesn't matter. like they can turn it up the right way up when they get it. It's okay.
Which I kept on waiting for that to come back as a plot point. Like the fact that he was going to like have to do something that was technologically minded or something like that. Not really. It was more so down the lines of, because the villains have control of the technology of the booth, him just doing things the quote unquote old way is like the way that he almost saves things, all like in a way.
It's more of a character quirk. I think the technology stuff is less there to set up that he's going to do something with it, and more to just explain to the audience who maybe... Because I imagine in 1990, maybe a lot of people weren't familiar with the fact that you could have phones on planes, and that's why they're hammering it home so no one questions later on when Atherton's calling the news station and all that shit.
Right.
So, yeah. Or even just something as simple as like all the stuff, the fancy stuff the villains are doing by jacking into the cables and whatnot.
I will say I don't know about the capabilities of hacking into the air traffic control or what that, so I'm willing to accept that they could do all this, but I'm so happy that we squeezed in just before they decided to do like, I'm in the mainframe, and they just like pull up matrix code on the screen.
Well, to be fair, they don't hack into it in like a computer sense. They literally drill into the ground and just like tap in, like they basically cut the cables going to the tower and just jack in their own cables to it. So this is less hacking and like I'm going to, get around the code. This is more pulling the HDMI plug out of their monitor and putting it into your monitor.
Yeah. And I'm just saying I'm grateful for it, because if I had to sit through like a 90s ass thing of like, they got a firewall, but I'm going to be able to double bypass shut up, please stop.
Even some of the best. Jurassic Park's got a bullshit hacking scene in it as well.
And it's still, looking back on it, very cringy. It's funny how they decided to be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, apparently when you hack, there's like a digital like model of the file system, and it's like flying through it, and all that bullshit.
I am so upset that we as a culture decided to ditch the idea of cyberspace. That was such a cool idea.
It's so funny because it was so new that they're like, oh, most people don't know or use these things, so we can get away with making it look more impressive because it's not exciting as what it is. But the problem that's basically happened is that by the time we got to the 2000s, is that most people were growing up actually using these things, so knew it was all bullshit, so it just made everything feel more fake. So obviously that's why they stopped doing it. But
I mean, my favorite late stage version of that was there was apparently a music video. Someone in the comments could remind me what it was, but there was a music video where someone had a very early version of like a flip phone or something, and they wanted to show a text saying like, "Hey, come over tonight," but they didn't have a text message option on that phone, so it was literally like a Microsoft Excel like spreadsheet on the screen because it had the ability to do like a spreadsheet thing instead.
Who wants to use a spreadsheet on like a tiny
It was like a
phone?
business phone thing. I'm sure that was the selling point of it.
That's okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll roll with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the movie starts with John McClane getting a parking ticket at the airport, and we find out that he is now LAPD, right?
Questionable choice, but I'm willing to accept it just for the setting of it.
Well, why is that questionable?
I don't know. I don't see him leaving the NYPD. I know that he moved out across the country and obviously he'd need a new job, but like I don't like the fact that he went LAPD. I don't know. It's just something in me.
Wait, so given the end of the first movie, you don't like the idea that he decided to support his wife and go move to LA to stay in the marriage?
I like that as a concept, but I don't know. Something in me says, like, even when he's talking to this guy writing the ticket, he's like, "Hey, I'm LAPD." And the guy's like, "I hate LA. I don't care." And he's like, "I know, I hate it too. I'm actually NYPD. That's what I am in my heart." And I'm like, yes, exactly. And John McClane should always be NYPD in my mind.
Which is why it's perfect. Wouldn't it be kind of weird if we started this movie and he's like, "No, I've still not moved to LA to be with my wife. I'm still being a dick and like just visit her for Christmas."
She's literally flying over to the East Coast and he's already here. Like,
because they're visiting her parents. They're going to spend Christmas with.
Right, I know they explain it, but I'm just saying it would have been a very tiny script change to be able to have him still be NYPD. I'm not angry at it. I'm not upset with it. I don't think it's a bad choice to do what they did. I just think that it's like John McClane should always be NYPD in my mind. That's just how I picture him.
But let's say they didn't. Let's say they started this movie with him saying he's NYPD. That would imply that Holly gave up her career and went back to New York, assuming they're still together.
I'm sorry, her boss was murdered in a terrorist incident and the entire building exploded. I think she might have ditched that company after all of that.
Hey, she probably got promoted because there was an opening.
Fair enough.
Mr. Takagi had big shoes to fill, all right?
She just gets over the trauma of it because they need a CEO right then. Hey, sure.
And the building was still standing. Like, they could fix it up.
Not their floor. Their floor's gone.
The top couple of floors need to be, reworked, admittedly, but the building's still there. This is such a weird. Like, I get what you're saying, but the fact that John McClane even says that in his heart, like his spirit animal, he is NYPD,
right?
It almost just negates the point you're trying to make.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Anyway, so he's like, "Hey, don't give me a parking ticket. I'm even a cop. Come on, it's Christmas." And it's why Phil says it's Christmas, and the guy giving him the ticket's like, "Yeah, Merry Christmas. Here's your parking ticket." And it's like, all right, F you.
Yeah.
All right.
It's also, I mean, you're saying parking ticket. He's actually getting towed because he parked in the wrong spot. But also, it's his mother-in-law's car on top of it.
Yes, that's the extra.
He's got all these extra layers of, please don't let this happen right now. This is worse than Hans Gruber.
Do you know, actually, one of my favorite things about the first 10 minutes of this movie is all of the world building, if you even want to call it that, of like his in-laws. I love that there's just a couple of references to the fact that his mother's going to be pissed at him, especially when Holly says, "Oh, is mum's still mad that you borrowed the new car?" Like, I love that extra detail we get from her later. But even just John saying, "Oh yeah, the kids are great, although they're probably going to get a coma after all the sugar that your parents are giving them." I think it's building up this chaotic thing back at the in-laws' house that I just like to imagine going on whilst all this airport shit's happening.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that had like a deleted scene to it, but I could absolutely imagine a scene where they like call over to the kids and it's just like kids running around, everything's chaotic, and the mother-in-law's just like, "When are you and Holly gonna be here?"
In fact, John even says on the phone, "Hey, why don't, instead of going home where the kids are, why don't we just go and get a hotel room and have some room service and champagne?" And she seems pretty game for that. She's like, "Yeah, screw the kids. Like, yeah, let's go and have a romantic." I mean, the in-laws, like, how their in-laws live in a different state. How often do they get this chance to just let the in-laws look after the kids and just go be a couple?
Oh, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
this is the time for it. Yeah, go and I'm trying to go die hard if you get my drift.
I mean, I would go with the Christmas season and say, go ahead and stuff your stockings.
It'll be a white Christmas in the McLean household tonight.
That implies it's going to be at the in-laws' house. It's going to be in the hotel room.
Oh, that reminds me. Do you know, I was actually thinking I might edit this joke in because it's annoying me that I didn't make it. But when we did Universal Soldier, not on this show, admittedly, this was over in the Atomic Cinema Experiment.
Okay.
We kept referring to this like side character as Jimmy Olsen because the female character in the movie was very Lois Lane, so we kept referring to this camera guy as Jimmy Olsen. And this guy gets killed early on. It's not even a spoiler. It's like the inciting incident for the main plot kicking off. And after we did that review, I was thinking about it and said, when I said they killed Jimmy Olsen, I should have said immediately afterwards, a young Zack Snyder takes notes. And I'm annoyed that I didn't think of it while we're actually recording.
Oh, God, this is what AI was built for. You just feed it in, get the faces matched up perfectly. No one will even know.
Part of me just wants to, when I'm editing, and just like pause the review there and be like, all right, this is pure from the future. Brace yourselves for this one.
I look forward to seeing it. Everyone go watch the Universal Soldier review, see if he did it.
Anyway, so, no, I mean, honestly, seeing John again's fun, seeing Holly again, seeing them interact and starting off in the movie in a much happier place. All of that's quite heartwarming, honestly, because, yeah, you were through the first movie with them. You kind of want to see them be happy. So this is all nice. I think the problem, obviously, though, is starting this movie off is that you have to like establish the threat, and it is kind of interesting to say, okay, this time John McClane's in a building that's full of literally thousands of people. There's a sea of people in the main area of this building, and he's going to have to get involved even though all these people are around. And I will say that the moment that he gets involved, and we'll go back and talk about the intro to the villains in a sec, but the moment he gets involved, he basically just does get involved because he sees someone looking a bit shifty. And that's it. Like, that's the entire motivation for him to what leads to a gunfight in the baggage area of the airport with all the, you know, all the conveyor belts and all that. That happens because John McClane just sees someone look a little bit suspicious. And it's definitely like, okay, this feels a little bit of a stretch to kick us off, when I feel like maybe there could have been something a bit more justifiable for him to be like, I need to go into action.
Something concrete that would have been able to say like, oh, this is definitely, because that's the other thing is, as we're doing this opening segment, we see Colonel Stewart, as you said in the beginning, he does his strange naked yoga thing while he's watching TV. Sure, whatever. But as him and all of his goons get to the airport, we see that John actually bumps into him, like actually hits him, and he's like, hey, you look awfully familiar. And Colonel is just like, oh, I get that a lot. I've been on TV. And Bruce Willis is like, yeah, same. And then they just go their separate ways. And it's not until much later that he realizes, like, oh, wait, that was Colonel Stewart. He was involved in this somehow. Okay, I'm putting the pieces together. I feel like maybe they could have done something with that. Maybe see, like, this guy who he bumped into and he already feels look familiar is seen doing something shifty rather than just a random goon. But
yeah,
not the way it played out.
Yeah, I actually, one of the things that I do like that was brought up there, which kind of comes up from a few other characters later on, is this idea that McClane, because of the Nakatomi like incident, was on a couple of TV programs, being interviewed for it, and did have a little bit of minor celebrity because of it. And just there's a couple of references to that. You know, the airport police guy says, yeah, I know who you are. You're some hero because of that Nakatomi shit. But, you know, you're in my airport now. I'm the big fish that runs this pond.
For all of about 6 minutes until someone else comes in.
Yeah, this guy really wants to throw his weight around. He wants to feel important. But I like these little like world building elements of like what his life has been for these past 2 years. It's not much, but I do like the little sprinkles that are there.
I think that's why I do like the idea that him and Holly have a much more close relationship here, because if it would be so easy to just say like, oh, you know, they're constantly fighting all the time, even between movies, it's just something that like they're still working on. No, it's been 2 years. They had a traumatic experience where like they worked it out together. I think that it's perfectly reasonable for them to be in a perfectly good spot right now.
Yeah, and doesn't take much to think, okay, her job's this big, executive hotshot thing. She couldn't leave until later, so John took the kids out early. And there you go. It's that simple.
Plus, I mean, anybody trying to fly in to DC on Christmas Eve is actually an idiot.
Yeah, well, yeah, they do constantly. I mean, if anything, that's probably the biggest impact that the Christmas thing has, is that it's how busy it is, how extra stressed all of the public are trying to like get their flights or land with the locations. So
and they also specifically wanted to work in snow to the plot. So setting it at Christmas got that winter storm working pretty well. Yeah,
for sure. I will say, though, a lot of the early setup, though, of this movie, it is really weird looking. I mean, obviously, we can talk about technology, and one of the things I was thinking about later on when the terrorists who basically impersonate air traffic control to make a plane crash, I was thinking, like, so much of the plot revolves around the idea that they shut off the runway lights, and I feel like in 2024, those are probably not needed because everything's probably a lot more helped by computer, I would assume.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I'm sure they still have them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't use runway lights. Clearly, it's a good backup system, but...
Oh, right. That's the thing. It's the backup. Like, clearly, you're going to have humans who are guiding this stuff in. You're going to do all that. But, like, the main thing that makes the plane crash is that they say, oh, we set ground level to minus 200 feet. So, like, they think they're higher up than they actually are, which I don't think that has ever been feasible. I think that is... Absolutely, you can't just tell a plane, oh, hey, now you think you're higher up than you are.
Yeah, that's
like remotely.
Yeah, that's how they actually obviously kill that one plane. But a lot of the plot revolves around, we've got no runway lights for all these planes to land, and it's like a big hindrance. I feel like in 2024, that would probably not be that big of a deal.
Yeah,
they'd probably have backups or main ways to deal with that.
That's the sort of question of, it's the same thing, I think it was Ronald Reagan, it might have been Bush, but I think it was Reagan who saw the movie War Games, saw the hacking in it, and he was like, how likely is this to actually happen? And his generals went off, came back and said like, oh God, it's awful. We need to like absolutely work on that. So it's like one of those things where it might have been a totally reasonable thing at the time that got better after the fact.
Yeah. I mean, the point I was getting at though is how much of the early stuff of this movie, where in fact the villain even points it out that the security at this airport's a joke, and all I could think was, yeah, after 9/11, this ain't going to be such a breeze pulling all this shit off, I tell you right now.
Yeah, it's weird. The fact that this takes place in DC and the fact that the terrorists aren't actually on the plane, it completely just skated by my, ooh, that's not okay post 9/11 sort of radar. Like, it's like they crashed planes. I was like, yeah, that's fine. Whatever. No big deal.
Yeah, there's nothing in this that actually even alludes to that, because it's got nothing to do with it being DC. That just happens to be where this bad guy's been taken on a prisoner transport, and therefore that's where the target is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so John McClane sees some of these guys who have all hidden weapons and Christmas presents, which apparently, as we find out later, got through security because they're fancy German guns that are made of porcelain?
Ceramics and porcelain and whatnot.
So they don't set off airport security, which immediately is what, at least once he's had the fight with one of them, he's like, hey, this is kind of a big deal. This isn't just like luggage thieves. These are professionals with like high-tech stuff. Like they're up to something. Like whatever this is, you need to take it seriously. And of course, no one's listening to him.
It's the Jaws thing. It's the mayor of Jaws, where it's like, this is the most busy airport on the most busy night, and you want us to just shut down part of the thing and like not take care of the flights? You're crazy, man.
Yeah, but I can't believe I'm going to defend the characters in this, but I do actually think this is a little more justifiable than Jaws, just because in Jaws, it's all about just making money, right? It's a sort of greed thing. Whereas here, the thousands of people and the planes in motion are all happening already, right? It's like, if we shut down right now, then it gums up so much for such a long time. So I at least get the hesitation. Obviously, they should still listen to him because, well... Yeah. But,
that was the thing. So the whole shtick of it is the guys that he is tracking down, they go into a back room. He follows them. They get into a shootout, and then he ends up killing one of them.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he does ask for identification, and then they try and shoot him. And that's why it starts. So he doesn't just John McClane doesn't just start firing off shots willy-nilly.
Yeah. Not until the next meetup. Then he'll just fire shots willy-nilly.
And he kills one of the guys because he gets stuck on the conveyor going up the luggage.
That's right,
thing.
yeah.
Which, not the memorable death in this. There's a couple of memorable ones in this, but that's not one of them. The icicle's probably the one that sticks out the most, if I'm remembering them.
I don't remember it sticking out. I remember being lodged in there pretty tight.
So... yeah, I mean, basically, one of my issues with the villains in this, actually, is that they're kind of not in the airport. Like, there's a couple of people in the airport to do specific things, but the main, like, villain base of operations is this church that's, you know, it's like, obviously near the airport. They sort of bring that up, but it's vaguely in a little town that's near the airport. And they're using here because a lot of the communication lines to the airport run through this place. So they kill the guy that lives there. They set up base there, and that's just their air traffic control center, basically.
Yeah, apparently they were much later on in the movie. They're talking about how there were extensions to the airport and blah blah blah. So basically, all of the cables to the airport go under this church area, and that's how they're able to hack in and take over everything.
Yeah, so they shut off the runway lights. They take control, and it's when McClane's up in the air traffic control try to argue with them. They say that something's about to happen, and then of course it does. So the shit actually hits the fan.
That being said, I do like, because the cop is there, who obviously he's been butting heads with already, because he came in and started chewing the guy out, saying like, why haven't you shut down the airport? This is a major crime. This ain't luggage thieves. But with the cop talking to the air traffic controller, that's when McClane comes in, and the air traffic controller is willing to hear him out at the very least. Like, he understands the gravity of what's going to happen if John McClane is right.
Yeah, because he clearly has got the safety of like the planes and the passengers and all that kind of in his mind. That's kind of what his job is, fundamentally, is to make all that run safely. Obviously it's after the shootout where he, to try and prove or find out who these guys were, he goes down to the dead bodies and like says, "Hey, let me take some prints," and he steals like the ink pad from like the stamp thing from like the counter, just the help desk in the airport.
Yeah.
And he runs back with that. And I don't know why they felt the need to do this, but they basically do like a sequel to the moment in the first Die Hard where the air hostess kind of smells at him on the plane and clearly is attracted to him. They sort of extend that here by having this woman help him do this fax to Al in LA, who gets him the information about who this guy is. Turns out he was already dead years ago, which obviously wasn't real, but it's like, oh no, these are the people that have faked their deaths because they're,
this is the black ops, black bag stuff.
Yeah. And after he's done with that call, the lady says, "Hey, I get off work in an hour. Would you like to go get a drink?" And he's like, "Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts."
As he flashes his wedding ring.
Like, all right. This is a weird, like, we have to have someone attractive flirt with McClane. And obviously, I mean, it makes him likable that he's not going to cheat on his wife, but it's...
Yeah, I think it just kind of doubles down on that idea of John McClane is the man that everyone wants to be.
Sure.
Like, it's just setting up as like, chicks are into him. He's a badass, but he's also faithful in his marriage, loving wife. Like, he's just got everything.
I feel like it's almost the thing that sticks out though as being less, because it's John McClane typically is the hero that does feel like the everyman. Having hot babes constantly be attracted to him is the one thing that feels not real about that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it would be something if like he were doing something like really impressive or whatnot, but from her perspective, he's just on the phone with someone in LA and is getting a fax. Like, he didn't do anything.
I mean, maybe she thinks it's cute how much he does not know about, because not only does he get worried that it's upside down, which isn't an issue. He then says, "Hey, what's the number for him to fax back?" And she's like, "It's in the corner of the fax that he got." And John says that to Al, and I'm pretty sure Al just knows this. Like,
yeah.
But
it's like your grandmother telling you, like, you just have to go to www. It's like, girl, stop, please.
It's on the internet, on the computer.
Okay. Thank you. I'll look it up on the YouTubes later. Bye.
So. Yeah, I mean, so John gets this information, makes this clear. This does make them do a bit of a double take, where the air traffic guy's kind of like, oh, that's a bit more serious. And I think it's at this point where all the stuff shuts off and the bad guys take control. And make it clear that they care about this plane coming in, and like, is that the bad guy's plane? It is. They want to have control, and they say, hey, if we do anything to try and restore communications with the planes, if we try and take back control of the system or the any of that stuff, they will teach us a lesson. There'll be consequences. Which the airport police guy immediately is like, he's bluffing. And I'm like, dude, you're putting a lot of people on the line just to like test that.
I love he especially says he's bluffing after all of the lights go out and like they've already tried emergency stuff. And he's just like, he's bluffing. It's like, he did it. There's no bluff here. He already played his hand. What are you talking about? He's bluffing.
He's in control. He's cut us off from everything. I think they actually say you've still got like comms for like 10 minutes with the planes, but after 10 minutes that's gone as well. So they're able to feed them some line from the ground at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of felt iffy about that line, especially watching later on in the movie. It felt to me like they realized in the scripting order of things that like they needed to tell the plane something to get them into that circling pattern.
Yes.
But like they never explained in the earlier scene how they'd still be able to communicate with the plane. So they just added in that line of like, you got 2 minutes of airtime and then I'm cutting you off.
It's basically fixing a plot hole that they noticed. And that's basically what it is.
Because, like, there's no reason for him not to then say, by the way, there are also terrorists, ignore anything that's coming out of it. Like, he should have said something like that, but whatever.
Yeah, no, it's strange. Because all the planes that have enough fuel to get to a different airport, they can all go. But some of them, obviously, you have to circle above. Like, you've got no other options. Right. Which, it does give you a good timer, because I think it's not at this point, it's another half hour into the movie or something, but eventually someone says, hey, Holly's plane's got 90 minutes of fuel left, and it's like, okay, that's urgency. That gives us like a deadline to make things nice and tense. I'm all for that. That stuff's good. Yeah. To stay on the plane for a second here, we'll just talk about all the plane stuff first, just because it is so separate from everything else. Mm-hmm. So they introduce Thornburg, who, as we meet him on the plane, he is livid that he has been put in coach because he was supposed to be in first class, but the flight was overbooked, and he's pissed off that even though he's agreed to sit in the back, that he's not getting the first class meal. He thought he'd still get that, and he's been a dick to the air hostesses. And there's just, I love the look on Holly's face as she sees him, and he doesn't see her for quite a bit of time, and it's not until after they've sat him down, and the ladies on the plane clearly hate his guts, because they start like saying, you did that expose on airlines and talked about bimbos in the sky, and they're like grilling into him, and after they've sat him down, he's finally shut up, he looks over at Holly and then immediately starts yapping again about, oh no, you're breaking a court order, I'm not meant to be close to this woman.
God, like, he's just the same character from Ghostbusters, and good on him. Like, he's got his role, but every single, like, immediately the moment he sees Holly and he starts going off about the court order, I'm like, oh my God, it's just you. Is this just how you act? Is this why people cast you in these roles? Because this is just how you are?
I almost want to critique it, but there is something very funny about the air hostess coming over to Harlin saying, what did you do? And she's like, I knocked out his teeth on TV. Mm-hmm. And her immediately going, can I get you some champagne?
I thought for sure, obviously it wouldn't work for later on in plot points, but I thought for sure the solution to her being in the same cabin as him is to put her in first class. To be able to be like, you knocked out his teeth? Well, you guys can't be in the same coach together. Funny. Come with me.
Also, at this point, this was right after the first phone call with John, it introduced the old lady sitting next to her, who's like, technology's wonderful. Look at my taser. And I'm like, can you take a taser on a plane? I feel like you probably can.
Absolutely not. Not nowadays, at least. But no, I both love and hate that lady, because from a writing perspective, she's so on the nose, like weird, but I also just love, she's fun. She's a fun character, because she's like, I used to carry around mace, but now I got this. And it's like, all right. And then she goes on about how she tased her dog to test it out. And you just see Holly's eyes like, okay, sure, yeah. Yeah,
she's lucky that didn't kill the dog, because the dog's much smaller. It may not be able to take the same voltage.
She's like, it was limping for a week. And it's like, oh, God, lady, please move to another seat.
Yes, obviously the payoff to this, though, is that later on, Holly's going to use this bad boy on Thornburg.
Yep.
So I want to point out something. At one point in the movie, the people on the plane are watching The Simpsons on like the screen, and I had this thought where I went, wait a minute, when they made this movie, because this came out in 1990, meaning that this had to be season 1 when they shot this, because no other season existed. That's how new The Simpsons is.
I want to see if someone's already taken note of that and said what episode it was.
Yeah, I'm sure someone has. I'm sure you can tell if you know The Simpsons episodes well enough.
Season 1, episode 4.
Really early, okay.
Yep.
All right. Now, obviously, Fox owned The Simpsons, so it's a little bit, brand synergy, if you want to call it that. But
absolutely.
It's just funny to me that Simpsons is still going now.
I mean, up to a certain point, you could have said the same about Die Hard, right up until Bruce Willis actually retired. I would say Die Hard was still ongoing as of that point.
I mean, I don't know. It's different with movie sequels, especially when you take a long gap and then say, we'll do one more. But like, Simpsons has been ongoing, literally, without pause, outside of some writer strikes here or there, for 35 years. In fact, I happened to just see this yesterday, that the actor who plays Milhouse is leaving the show, but they have been doing it for 35 years. It's literally been most of their career has been voicing Milhouse.
That is crazy to me.
But they're retiring because they're old now.
I hope they got like full pension for 35 years as a single character.
Well, the good news is that anyone on The Simpsons, after like the show was successful, like once they got to like double digits in seasons, like those actors were starting to rake it in, because to be able to like keep them on board to a show that they probably would have been happy to leave, and like, you know what, I've done 10 years of this, it's fine. Oh, you want me still around because you don't want to lose this character? Oh, I'll double my fee, thank you. Money, please.
I'm surprised The Simpsons is still profitable to Fox. I mean, it must not cost that much to make, but
I doubt. Yeah, I mean, the actors must be the majority of the
cost,
the money.
right?
Yeah, I can't imagine. Oh, jeez. And I'm sure because AI can probably make some Simpsons episodes soon, they'll keep it going forever.
Season 40, the first AI written season. Season 41, back to humans, because that didn't work.
No, I think they'll probably still have human writers, but they'll switch to AI animation first.
Oh, yeah. Just automatic mouth syncing. Yeah, that probably would save a ton of money.
Anyway, that's a depressing thought. So, anyway, I mean, Thornburg's plot in this, and I actually kind of appreciate the spin on it, that he basically does what he did in the first one, in which that he finds a way to report on what's happening, which is not public knowledge, and reveal it to the world. But I love the idea that in the first one, it was basically just a problem for the main characters because it exposed the kids on TV. In this one, when he exposes what's happening, and as he does it, I also want to add, he basically makes a speech about how he is a hero and that he has made great sacrifice to bring the people this knowledge, and that he is, jeopardizing his life and talent. He says that specifically, talent, to bring them this. And it intercuts with the entire airport of people, like, just rioting and running and fleeing because there's panic now, because he's scared the shit out of everyone. And I just love this idea that he just does what he did before, but on, like, a multiplier of, like, extreme scale.
God, I hated this character so much. But no, I really like the idea that it is the last time that he shows up, because it does feel like this is as bad as he can really get. Like, he caused a riot in Dulles Airport because he wanted his fame, notoriety, and he even says himself Pulitzer. But I do like that they give him, much earlier on, a singular line while Holly's calling him out for, like, you put my kids in danger last movie, man. Like, what? Like, you don't see anything wrong with that? And he says something along the lines of, like, everyone has a right to know about everything. And that's the way he sees it. Like, he sees himself as the giver of fire to mankind, giving this information and just letting them do whatever it is, regardless of how harmful it may be to any other people.
Yeah, because he does notice that there's a lot of planes, like, sort of circling in the same area. And I'm not sure how feasible they would actually be that close for the sake of them seeing them, but
no.
It was one thing I thought, actually, at the end when they're all landing, you can actually see, like, them all, like, just sort of Like, like you can literally see a string of them all sort of like one's like almost on the ground, one's a little bit higher. I was thinking to myself, normally they would never let planes land so like, close one after the other. But I did have the thought as well that, okay, by that point in the movie, they're all out of fuel and it's like we either land now or we fall out the sky. So yeah. I'm willing to accept that they would probably bend a lot of the usual other safety rules if it's like the only option they have. So I'll let that one go to an extent.
I agree. I was 100% like, okay, we have one airstrip lit up. We can go ahead and take everybody in there. But my problem was with air traffic control saying like, oh, hey, we've got a line clear. They can see it. Let's let them know. And then one of the guys is just like, they already do. And he smiles. And I'm like, no, you still need to coordinate this, guys. This is still a problem of coordination.
Yes. You're lucky these planes didn't all just start smashing into each other on the ground.
Yes. Especially because it looked like Holly's plane was the first one. In fact, it was, plot-wise. It was the first one down. And it looks like it just hits the runway, goes to the end, and stops. I'm like, bro, you need to at least pull over. For the love of God, get off the runway.
Yeah, that's just one of those things. So anyway, the end of that stuff is that Holly zaps him with a taser, and he is basically foaming at the mouth for the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's that stuff.
I don't think it's as satisfying as the punch to the face, especially because it comes a good 20 minutes before the end. But it's all right.
There's that little tag though where he's lying in the snow at the end, and the old lady is there, and he's like, "Please help me up," and she's like, "Asshole."
Just steps over him.
Yeah.
That's again not as satisfying in my book, but
no.
I think what I really wanted was, because he was live on air as he gets tased, I wanted him to somehow humiliate himself live on air. Like everyone in the country is now able to play back the clip of him like screaming like a girl or something.
Or maybe Holly,
I don't know.
Maybe Holly could pick up the phone and say something like a one-liner.
This man has no dick.
He gets that a lot.
Yeah.
Guess that a lot. So the first big thing that happens once the terrorists have enacted their plan is that the character that we've mentioned in passing, I think his name is Barnes, he's like the...
Barnes is the head.
No, that's Fred Thompson. That's Trudeau. That's
Trudeau. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
My bad.
So Barnes is the guy that seems, I don't know what his job title is, but he seems to be the one that goes down and actually like fixes problems.
Like technician or something. Yeah.
So he's like, hey, we can use this other relay antenna thing to like tap into a separate type of broadcast signal, and we can talk to our planes without these bad guys knowing. So let's go over there and do that. And the police guy's like, hey, we'll get the airport SWAT team with you. We'll make sure you're protected, because if we can think of that, they can think of that. And they're doing it. And McLean's kicked out of the air traffic at this point. Right? They're saying you're a civilian. You're not on duty here. Go away. Yep. So they put him in the elevator, and he gets stuck with the female journalist who's been trying to get interviews. And honestly, this character we've barely mentioned, because honestly, there's nothing to say about her.
So little. God, she shows up in one, maybe two earlier scenes, depending on how you count it. She shows up here, and then she disappears for 90 minutes.
Yes. Yeah, she's just set up for later. But basically, the airport police guy's like, hey, officers, make sure you escort him out of the elevator when he gets down there. But of course, he does a Die Hard 1 trick where he stops the elevator and climbs out the panel at the top and starts going rummaging around all the maintenance areas.
I do like he specifically says, don't worry, I've done this before.
Yeah, I like that line. I don't know if I liked where he got really on the nose on his own, where he's like, another basement, another elevator shaft. How can the same shit happen to the same guy twice? I don't even mind the first part. Him saying another elevator shaft, another basement, that part's fine. But him saying how can the same shit happen to the same guy twice, I'm like, you know what, movie? Don't have him say that.
I think I would have been okay with it if it were 3 times. If you say, I've done this before, he can have one of the middle lines, and then the last time where Holly says, why does this keep happening?
The Holly one was funny, though, to be fair.
Yeah. If you had just those 3, I would have been fine with it. But there's like 2 or 3 other ones where he keeps on calling back to like, why does this keep happening to me? And it's okay, cut it down a little bit here. We all saw the last one. We know, we get it. Just do it.
Yeah, the Holly line at the end is actually pretty funny. And maybe it's just because it's a better written line and her delivery is quite good. because because keep in mind that from her perspective, she didn't really know there was like a big problem until like Act 3. Like she was unaware of what was going on down below. So
I love from her perspective, her husband just runs up limping, covered in blood, and then she says like, "Oh, they said there were terrorists," and John's reply is, "I heard that too."
Yeah, I killed them all.
Yeah, it's don't worry, this isn't my blood.
Oh dear. So McClane meets the janitor character. First of all, he thinks he's suspicious, so he holds the gun on him for a second, but that goes nowhere. And then he's like, "Hey, tell me where this," because he knows the location. He heard them talk about this location for this antenna thing.
The Annex Skyway, I think it was.
Yeah, whatever it's called. And he's like, "Here it is." And McClane's like, "That's a terrible spot. That's an ambush spot." So he goes rummaging in the air ducts to get there.
That's a terrible spot. If they put a Terminator there, everything would go haywire.
So he gets there, of course, but by the time he does get there, like most of the SWAT team are dead. He gets there to save Barnes, right? He saves his life. And there's a decent fight scene, he like this is where Robert Patrick is, and they're pretending to be painters. Now it turns out they're out there at this location, these bad guys, a small group of the bad guys, because they were setting this antenna thing to explode, which happens at the end of the scene. So that's why they're there in the first place.
Yeah, it was literally there to be bait, because they knew that they would try this, and they would bring along the SWAT team. So they'd get the drop on the SWAT team, they blow up the thing, and now they don't have any recourse to fight back anymore.
Yeah, all the airport's like best, force would be gone because they've taken them out. Of course, as William Sadler says, losing all their own men was not part of the plan, but that's John McClane's thing.
No one accounts for John McClane.
I do like the little bit at the end of this, though. He's killed two. There's 3 bad guys. He's killed 2 of them, and the third one's got him kind of pinned down. But it's at the end of the what do you even call those? Like the flat escalators, the walkways.
It's just a moving sidewalk.
Yeah, moving sidewalk. And it's not on, but like McClane's gun's fallen in front of him on it, so he hits the button so it'll bring the gun to him. I actually really like that as a little bit.
Yeah. This is one of the few things that really takes advantage of the airport layout. I feel like it does a very good job of saying, you're in an airport, here's the kind of stuff you're going to have, and they make it work for the fight scene.
Yeah. They kind of tried to do that with the baggage area. They just didn't go far enough, I think.
Yeah. No, it was just... the baggage area fight was basically just them throwing a bunch of luggage at each other, and then that one guy getting crushed. I feel like there was a lot more that could have gone into that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So this sets up that, okay, they're going to listen to John a little bit more after this. Not, I mean, Barnes certainly works with him quite a bit after this, because in retaliation for this, because like, hey, you tried to get that antenna and we told you not to try and reconnect anything, so we have to, give you an example. And this is where they trick the plane into crashing into the concrete. And McClane, bless his heart, hears this is happening and tries to go out and warn him by just waving some like he basically just sets some fire to some like,
it's just some oil-soaked rags.
Yeah,
he's just waving as a beacon, and
he's trying his best to signal him. So we get some nice visuals here of the plane going right over his head and it ultimately blowing up and him diving into the snow. And I think what I liked about this scene, to be fair, it's one of the standout scenes of the movie, because unlike the first one, he actually like fails to save like hundreds of people here. And he's kind of crying when he gets up, like after the explosion. You can see on his face he's actually feeling the impact of not being able to save all these people. It's not even his wife's plane. Oh, actually, speaking of actors, the pilot on this flight that crashed. Colm Meaney from Star Trek: Deep Space Nine. But he's also in Under Siege. He's in a lot of stuff, but he's an Irish actor.
Fair enough.
So yeah.
But yeah, no, I also really like that scene. I think that it does a good job of continuing on what we had earlier on in Die Hard 1 with John. There's that sequence where Hans Gruber is blowing up the tank and he goes a little like extra on it. And you see John getting like really upset about that. You have the sequence with, I'm blanking on his name, Ellis?
Yeah, Ellis. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, is like him trying to save Ellis, but failing to,
And again, that's just one guy. And then meanwhile, you have this sequence here where obviously he's not responsible for the choices that were made at this point. They were going to the antenna regardless, but he is the one who killed the men, and it's perhaps a little bit his fault that they're reacting so harshly to this because the men were killed. So he does feel very guilty about this. And like you said, it's hundreds of people, not just one Ellis, not just whoever's signed up for this job in the tank. These are innocent people that all died in this crash.
And we see a glimpse of them as well. We see like a quick bit where we see an old lady, we see a child on the plane.
God, it's I know, like, as I'm watching that scene, I'm like, I know you're just purposely pulling, like, the only thing that's missing is like the little dog that's just running up and down the aisles, but like, it works. They know it works.
Yeah, actually, the hostess said to the old lady, "We're just like British Rail. We may be late, but we'll get you there." And I thought, why is that comforting to her? The British Rail's not that spectacular. What are we talking about?
Peter, I have been on the British Rail. Compared to whatever the U.S. has got,
okay,
I would take that as a blessing.
Yeah, Joe, it's so funny. Is last night I watched a movie called The Station Agent, starring Peter Dinklage and a bunch of other people. But the character's into trains, right? And he's really into trains and train tracks. And at one point, him and the other character talk, they actually name a couple of train routes because they have names in the US. Like, oh, this is the one that goes from like LA to San Francisco, or this is the one that goes from like through the Rockies or whatever. And they have names, like dedicated names. And I'm like, okay, there must be so few train tracks in America that you actually have names for some of them, because we don't have names for a single train track in the UK. There's just tons of them.
Well, I mean, when you get to London, you got like the Piccadilly line and all that stuff, the Elizabeth line. So they do have names. But no, I get what you're saying. Like, trust me, there are that few tracks that are of any major size. So you're right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just used to there being a robust train, because we still complain about it all the time for other reasons. But clearly, yes, you've experienced both sides.
That was literally like I got on the plane to go back home after being there, and that was the one thing I was going to miss. I was like that. I just. Public transport, and I looked at my bank account afterwards and it cost me like $3.50 a day. I'm like, oh God, please.
Oh dear. Anyway, so yes, reaction to this is pretty rough. This is where McClane finds out his wife's only got 90 minutes on the flight. They're all just kind of like sitting around. I think at this point, like the air traffic guy, Trudeau, comes over and kind of like tells McClane that, but we also find out that they've called in the government and they're sending a team like of anti-terrorist countermeasures or whatever.
Sending two of their best, Johnson & Johnson, not related to the previous Johnson & Johnson.
No. So see, in this movie, we don't get incompetence, we get secretly a villain. That's what we get this time.
Yeah.
But
I will admit, they got me. I didn't see it coming, so good on them.
Yeah, I suppose. It's funny because I don't remember watching this and not knowing, because I saw this as a kid, so I don't remember what it was like to watch it without knowing this. There's things I like about it, there's things I dislike. I think the character himself and his team are kind of whatever. I think part of it is that I just don't like the idea of John McClane getting into a fight with a whole team of people, because it feels very un-Die Hard.
Oh yeah.
So that some parts of it I just don't like. I do love the moment later though, where to prove that they're bad guys, he fires one of their guns at the airport cop and just empties the clip into him, and the guy just screams in fear because he thinks he's being shot. And then obviously, no, they're blanks. This is what they're firing out there. They're not hitting each other.
Look, I 100% understand the point of the scene. John McClane would be shot immediately. Like, there is no way he's firing this off in the middle of a police precinct and everything's just fine.
Yeah, no, that's it does make for a good moment though.
Yeah, it's a great moment, and it again, it really sells the point home of like, because that's the other thing. It's one of those moments that you were saying where it feels like John McClane knows the situation before the audience is let in on it.
Yes,
and it's only at that point that we're made aware of it.
I mean, there are teases that if you've seen it before, you notice them switching out their clips. You notice, little bits that hint at it, but it's not like a ton of it. Even though it is a good moment. So, one part that we I mean, I guess we're coming up to it if we're just skipping around a little bit. But, only going. What is it?
The plane, we see that inside of the plane that's holding the general is hijacked by the general. He manages to take out his armed guard and he shoots the pilots, and now he has to land the plane. But because everything is turned off, the people back at base have to turn back on a single runway for him to land on. Meanwhile, John's managed to pick up one of their radios, and he hears this whole plan, so he's going to intercept that.
Yeah, so yeah, we're getting up to this stuff, which the thing on the radio is that when he first gets one of the radios, it's after the first big shootout at the Skyway section, and he hears some beeping or whatever, and he goes over and he picks it up, and I was thinking to myself, I don't really remember how much this comes into it, but it feels like it definitely feels like a retread of the first one. If he has a radio, we can hear everyone. But I kind of like that they put a block on it and say, oh no, they've got a code or something you have to put in.
Yeah, it's scrambled.
Yeah. So it's you can't get it, but maybe later on you can get access to it. If anything, I thought once he did get access to one, it feels like it only gives him what they're doing for this section where the generals land in the plane. I thought maybe it would come into it again after that, but it never actually does. It's just it's kind of forgotten about after that point.
I mean, there's no point later on where they really have to use the radios anymore, but it also feels like the sort of thing where John played his hand too fast, where it's, if he had sat on the fact that he had this radio, he would have been able to have heard more, but because he intercepted the guy on the runway, they're like, how could he have known? Oh, right, we were saying this on the radio. Never mind.
Yeah, because I do like this set piece that comes up, right? Which is, the bad guy, the general, lands his plane, right? McClane's there to greet him at the door because the bad guy opens the door to the plane and goes, freedom. And John McClane hits him and says, not quite yet, asshole, or something like that.
He says 6 one-liners all in one little speech. He's just like, I'm a cop. You're a bad guy. That's it just keeps going.
Yeah, I think the motivation here makes sense. He basically thinks that if he gets this guy and takes him into custody, they've got a bargaining chip and therefore can get the planes landed safely, which is obviously his number one concern here. I don't think McClane, obviously they don't want to give up the bad guy who's supposed to be facing criminal charges. I think the priority here is saving everyone that's in the planes first, and then if we can keep a hold of this guy too, then great. But it's not the number one thing.
John 100% does not care about this guy. This guy can go free. He can be killed. He can do whatever they need to do with him. He only cares about A, his wife's plane, B, the rest of the planes.
Yeah. But the bad guys show up, of course, on their little snowmobiles. And basically, the general fights his way out and he's like, hey, there's a guy in there. He says a cop. And immediately Sadler's like, I'm just going to assume that's you, McClane.
Yeah, because they spoke over the radio earlier on and they were made aware of each other.
Yeah, so this sequence is basically them unloading their clips into the cockpit of the plane, which is basically the glass scene from the first Die Hard. It's like, hey, shoot the glass. It's the excuse to just have the bad guys have a wall of fire into a location.
But what happens when bullets aren't enough, Pete?
Well, how many grenades have they got? So they toss in a bunch of grenades, and I will say it's comical how long these grenades take to go off.
Absolutely. Before I counted out 20 seconds, and that's only after I realized I should be counting.
Yeah.
It's too long.
I don't know how accurate other movies are, but to me, I always thought if you take a pin out of a grenade and throw it, it's basically instant on impact. Yeah. But here it's no, they're going to sit there comically for 30 seconds. That said, though, it does give us him hitting the ejector seat on the cockpit seat and flying into the air with the explosion underneath him, which is a fun visual.
Yes, it is a fun visual. However, when I said at the beginning that it never crossed the line, but it flirted with it.
Oh, this is the line.
This is the flirting with it. This is the moment where I'm like, look, I'm still having fun, but don't do that again. Okay. If you do that again, it's going to be too much.
To be fair, all the best plane stuff is at the end, I would say.
Right.
But I don't know. I enjoy this one. I also kind of appreciate that they know he survived because they see the parachute and they're like, that lucky son of a bitch.
I mean, I like the fact that they know he survived, but I also wonder why, did you really empty your entire clip? Not one person has a single bullet left to just take him out?
Dear. For me, though, this is where, the movie... I think it's when, the teams show up, right? So Grant's the main guy, and then he's got his team, who I always think him of the because not when they first show up, I don't think, but for most of their time they're all wearing all white to blend in with the snow. It's basically snow camo, which is just plain white. But it's like, hey, they show up. He has a bit of a conflict with John at first, but then of course,
there's a whole thing where he's calling him out, just being like, "Oh, you're a hothead. We don't need you around here. This is a military thing." Blah blah blah. And then it like immediately pivots to the technician saying, "Hey, I think they might be hiding out in this neighborhood nearby." And so they go out scouting for that. And the moment that they get any positive intel, immediately the military guy's like, "All right, you're my new best friend. Like, we're going to have fun together and we're going to fight side by side and we're all cool."
Yeah, because Barnes just tells John this. He doesn't tell anyone else. He goes to John because at this point he kind of trusts John, based on, I guess, John saving his life and just generally making sense throughout the movie when everyone else isn't. But yeah, they basically find the church. And this is where he gets into a fight with the one guard outside and then stabs him with an icicle in the eye, which is a fun. But honestly, it's practically a scene from a horror movie. It just happens to be in the middle of a Die Hard movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with a good melee fight. I'm good with an improvised weapon fight, but they went hard on showing you the icicle still lodged in his eye socket, and that was not needed, but I will take it.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I'll take more of it, please. If you're going to give me a tight plot like the first one, then give me great terrorist deaths.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm all for it. But no, I agree with what you said earlier, though, with like how many of them are there and how many are still left. I have no idea.
Like, they show like just this random group inside the church, and we get no sensible count of it. All we know is enough for them to make a stand, even though they're, as you said, they're firing off blanks. So because the military group is actually on their side, which we find out later.
Yeah, so when we get to the ending and they're all together, it's like, okay, there's still like 40 people or something here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's enough to fill a plane. And then, we get into a snowmobile chase as they start to escape, and John's picked up one of their guns, and not knowing that it's full of blanks, he tries firing at them and can't understand why they're not going down.
Yeah, and Sadler tries to shoot at him, and he ends up blowing up his snowmobile. So we get like a sort of jump as it's on fire, and John McClane rolls out the way, and he's like, "I had him in my sights, I know I did." And then he checks the bullets, and he's like, "Oh no!" And that's when we get to him going back and revealing, what's going on, who the bad guys are. Because at this point, it's like, okay, one of their demands was to have a plane ready at a hangar that's fueled and ready to go, because they're going to leave. They're going to go and travel wherever they're going to go to.
Going to some tropical island, no extradition, no big deal.
Yep. That's the thing, because when they meet up together and William Sadler's like, "Oh, I really support your thoughts on our way of life," and like I'm like, what exactly is the politics of this? This is where I really questioned. I was like, so it sounds like you're just going off to live in a tropical island, which doesn't feel like you've got a purpose going forward. It feels like you're just retiring now.
It feels to me like he's doing all this like, "Oh, you understand like the real American way, the way things should be. Anyway, let's go to Cuba." Like, it seems almost completely opposite of what the rest of the stuff should be. This isn't them leading a coup. This isn't them like taking over a small nation state. This is just, and then we're going to retire and we'll be beach buddies all day long.
And if that's not what they're actually doing, they did a poor job of giving me any sense of what they were actually doing. We should mention there's a little, dare I call it, subplot, but there's like a guy on Grant's team who's like a sub, right? Because John talks to him briefly, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm filling in because like the regular guy got appendicitis." And this only comes up because it's the moment that Grant reveals they're actually bad guys. Is the like, "Hey, you're not one of our team, and it's a shame you weren't with us," and all these things. And he's like, yeah, I wish I was there with you guys. You guys are a great team. He's like, "Yeah, I wish you were there too, because that means I wouldn't have to do this." And then he slits his throat, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you don't know that we were actually all bad guys working." I was like, you could have made them an offer and said, "Hey, do you want to come to an island with us?"
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It seemed like everyone else was bonded in blood. Whatever happened in Grenada was the thing that got them all united. And that's John makes the point later on of Colonel Stewart got canned by the U.S. Congress. Like, he was released from his position, but before he left, he filled this entire crew up with his own guys, knowing that they would be the response unit. So that's why all of this was figured out to begin with. There was one other bit that does not matter at all, but I just love the moment where they go into the church. Barnes is there, obviously, and he's like, "Hey, this is all the stuff we need to land the planes. Like, we can start bringing things down. We can do that." And the Major's just, he says the line of like, wait, hold on. It might be booby-trapped. And before he even finishes saying the word booby-trapped, one of his guys is like, yep, right here, bombs. Like, he just immediately is on it. And obviously, it makes sense when you know that they're on the bad guys team, that they already know that this is going to be there. But I just love it from if he was still on the side of good perspective. It's like, no, the booby traps are really obvious and we should not be here right now.
Yeah, I thought they were just on a timer and they were all like, because correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't actually explode, does it?
No, not in the course of the movie. That being said, they filmed in an actual church that then they had to fix up. So I don't think they would have been able to blow that building up if they wanted to. Yeah,
see, these days you just do it with CG, but yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. You can't just do that now. So yeah, the big final set piece as the planes and the passengers are now aware, because during all this is when all the news is breaking, the tasing happens. They've been told to take crash positions. They're going to have to do an emergency landing. They've got no choice. They're out of fuel. Doesn't matter. They just have to try and do it by sight and hope for the best. So it's very serious. Holly's got her head down and she's doing like a whole little prayer and whatnot.
That's how you know it's serious, when the character says a prayer.
Yep. So John is determined to, of course, get there, and that's when he sees the news. Well, actually, he tries to go with the other cops first, but they end up crashing into a taxi, and he's like, screw this, these guys are useless. And he finds the news lady and says, hey, you've got a chopper, take me to it.
I looked down for a quarter second. Like, it looks to me like they managed to travel about 20 feet before they end up crashing. And like, I get it's chaotic, everyone's trying to like escape Dulles, but like at the same time, it was comedically short distance they managed to get.
Yes, and it was the guy giving the parking ticket that's the brother of the head of the airport police that was in the car with him. Just I'll mention that.
Extra little, bringing that back around.
So, yeah, he gets in the chopper and he's like, hey, get in front of the plane, because the plane's starting to move at this point. It's starting to ramp up on the runway. And John's like, get in front of the plane. And the pilot of the chopper's like, we're a tiny helicopter. That is a giant jumbo jet. We're not going to be playing chicken with it. He's like, okay, we'll get over the top of it then. And I'm like, aha, he's going to jump down out of the plane.
Yeah.
And gummy up the works. He shoves his jacket into like, not the engine, but like one of the
flaps.
Yeah. And they're like, shit, the plane can't take off. What's going on? So we get a fight on the wing with Grant and McClane. And of course, you have to do it. You have to have the bad guy go into the engine. Blood spatter, all that. Maybe
it's just me. Maybe the engine's like, I'm not sure exactly how it works. I thought for sure the moment he ended up in front of that engine, he was just going whoop right in.
I would have thought so
suction,
too.
You know?
I feel like that probably is the case. That's just something this movie got wrong. But admittedly, I am basing that on other movies doing things with plane engines rather than it being necessarily accurate. But I would have thought that too.
But I mean, at a certain point, if that's the way the culture, if that's the way the audience expects it to be, it's kind of weird when it doesn't play by those rules.
Sure, yeah. And then William Sadler comes out, and they do make a point here of saying they can't use any like guns because that plane's really fueled right now, or that wing, sorry. So like, if they hit anything with a bullet, then it's adios muchachos. So
whole plane goes up, and that was as soon as the guy turned around backwards and said like, "Don't use guns, it's fully loaded." I'm like, that thing is going to explode. There is no other option here. It will explode.
Yeah, but it does it in the most spectacular fashion. So McClane basically gets beat by William Sadler's character.
Yep.
But as he's dangling off the wing, he sees the fuel release thing. So he jacks that open. So it's leaking fuel as they're running down the runway. It's about to take off. In fact, when it finally does blow up, it's just a little bit off the ground because you see that the flames go up the fuel in like an angle, which is really cool. But John just rolls over to where the fuel starts because he landed obviously quite close to it, whips out his lighter and says, "Yippee-ki-yay, mother effer," before he sets it on fire. Which is, like, as much as Die Hard 2 is nowhere near as good as Die Hard 1, most people think it's weaker than Die Hard 3. This is maybe the best yippee-ki-yay in the whole goddamn franchise. It's perfect.
I will say that the first one was not used as a punctuation mark.
Of course,
the first one was just used as a badass line. I think in terms of being used as a punctuation mark, this is amazing. Like, it's a great way to do it. I have not seen the later ones, so I can't judge those, but I will say this one is very well done in terms of like, yeah, all right, you earned it. Go ahead and take it.
Now, I will say, from what I remember, the one in the fourth movie, on paper, is excellent. Okay. But because they had to make it PG-13, they had to kind of ruin it.
Ah, that sucks.
Let's just say there's another sound that interrupts the last word because they couldn't actually have him say that.
Just make it Melon Farmer at that point. Just play into it.
Because it is a perfect... Like, I remember so little about the fourth Die Hard, but I remember the context of which he says yippee-ki-yay mother effer. Obviously, I'm censoring myself because we're on YouTube and, ads. But anyway, plane goes boom. It's a pretty glorious, big practical effect. Looks good. And then, conveniently, this string of fire has formed a makeshift runway light, and Holly's plane is able to land, basically, and then perfectly safely.
Yeah, it's totally fine, and they're happily landing, and then all the news gets passed around to all the other planes, and they start coming in one by one.
Yeah, the only critique I have really about this ending, other than maybe the fact that there's so many goddamn bad guys that they all just die in an explosion, is a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say they show the main major, they show Colonel as well, and then they show the general guy, and those are like the main three. But then they also show at least a dozen other soldiers.
Yeah.
Just in the back, just like, all right, yeah, let's drink, have fun. We successfully betrayed our government. Hooray.
Yeah. It does feel a bit weird that they're all just like sitting in the plane partying still while the main guys are out fighting John, but whatever.
Right.
The other critique I'd have, though, is that they do a moment here when the plane's landed and the emergency like chutes have come out of the planes for all the passengers to slide off. And John's like limping around going, Holly! And it sort of played as this dramatic moment of like, he doesn't know if she's okay. And I get that he doesn't, but for the audience, like, we know that she's okay because we know for a fact that this is her, because he doesn't know for sure that it's her plane that's just landed. He doesn't know that.
Right.
Right? But we do.
Yeah.
And because we know it was all in the fact that they use fire as their light to like guide them down, it was a pretty normal, like, there's zero tension for the audience here that anything is wrong with Holly. But it's played as this moment of John being like, Holly, please be okay.
Honestly, is there any tension on John's side either? Like, unless he witnessed another plane falling out of the sky and crashing, he knows that there hasn't been another plane crash. So all these landing planes, like, Holly's got to be on one of them.
Yeah, that just follows my point that I'm making. That there's just no tension. And, like, with the way they're playing up this moment of him yelling her name like he's scared that she's dead, when really it should be more just him kind of stumbling and looking and like maybe catching her eye, and that could be like a big moment. But
I'll say I wasn't even thinking about that. You are absolutely right, though. The problem I had with this moment is that they have Holly about to go down the slide, but then she stops as she looks off and sees John like stumbling up. But like, they allow her to have the moment of like realization on her face. None of the extras behind her were given any direction, and they just stand there frozen faced for like a good 10 seconds where she's obviously supposed to be jumping down this slide by now, but they're just like, all right, and cut. And it's like nothing happens.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, it's whatever. They hug. The parking ticket comes back up because the cop drives up and says, "Hey, did my brother give you this parking ticket?" He rips it up and says it's Christmas, and then our janitor...
It's still stuck in the impound lot, though. You still have to pay to get it out of the impound lot.
Yes, the janitor version of Argyle rolls up in the little golf cart and says, "Hey, hop on with the missus," and drives them off, just like Argyle did at the end of the first movie. Which... the janitor character was weird. I don't think we needed him. He was just kind of this extraneous thing that just... I don't think it was funny. I never enjoyed any minute he had on screen.
I think that they 100% could have folded together Barnes and the janitor into one character, especially because there are sequences where Barnes is looking at maps and is like spreading them out, and that's the only thing that the janitor does.
Literally all you have to do is have Barnes want to trust and help John a couple of scenes earlier, and then just have him be that role entirely. Yeah.
Mind you, that would not allow them to have a character to drive him away at the end, but I don't think that's worth creating an entire character around him.
And to be honest, if Barnes had driven up at the end in the little golf cart and said, "Hey, can I get you back to the airport?" it wouldn't have felt that weird. It'd have been like, fine, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Put him in the luggage cart. Just say, "Yeah, I commandeered this. Whatever. Let's go." Oh, that's one thing we forgot to mention. At some point, somewhere in the middle, after the first plane crashes, they figure out that they can use some other system and then warn them, "Hey, don't listen to any directions unless like this access code is used." So that way you will not be thrown into the ground with extra force.
Yeah, no other planes will be tricked, so that's not a threat anymore directly. Yeah. Still have to land the planes, of course, safely, which is obviously their other pickle, but John McClane figures out a way to do that.
Just got to set one plane on fire and the rest of them survive. Perfectly done.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a reasonably fun movie. It just, it's definitely subpar in like so many ways, especially when compared to the first. In terms of plot, in terms of villains, the villains just aren't that interesting. In fact, they're actively what the first movie was kind of poking fun at in a lot of ways, which is kind of scathing. The third movie has Jeremy Irons as the villain, and he does feel like it's like a step back up again, whereas like, okay, for any other differences that might be here, you've got a strong villain again that's going to sort of go against John McClane, and that's a big part of it, I think. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, that was part of what we were saying when we were picking MVPs last time, or at least I was that John McClane on his own is a solid hero, but the villain is what allows him to really be his thing. Like if you have a strong villain for him to play against, it really allows him to shine.
Yeah, and there's good individual moments in this for sure. We talked about the Yippee-ki-yay and like how he takes out the plane, his emotion after that one plane does get destroyed. Like there is some genuinely good moments sprinkled throughout this. It just doesn't all coming together in quite the same way that Die Hard does pretty much perfectly. And I don't think there's any danger of us picking Colonel Stewart as the MVP of this one.
No, I mean John Leguizamo, he's definitely up there. But
he had a line of dialogue, a whole line. He
stole my heart with it.
Oh dear! I love the idea that by the time this was coming out, Robert Patrick was probably already shooting Terminator 2 and was like, "This is my starring, role here."
He just crossed a lot. He's like, "Hey, I heard you guys need a stone-faced actor. Check out what I just did in Die Hard 2.
Oh, dear. All right, what was your scene of the movie?
Oh, boy, scene of the movie. I'm not sure, really. I mean, there's a bunch that, like, work for me. I think I would probably just have to go with the emotional punch of the plane crash. In the middle, like the one full of civilians. I think that as much as all the other action scenes have something to them, that's the only one that I felt like was top to bottom just a very well done sequence. I think that again, part of what I was praising so much in Die Hard 1 was John McClane not being the stone-faced, immortal, just tanking bullets sort of action hero. He's the kind of guy who does get upset by just civilians dying, and this is the only time in the movie that I feel like it really was set in that direction. It was the only time that it felt like a big deal. So I'm just going to say the entire sequence of him running out, trying to stop the plane from crashing, but ultimately failing, and then if you want to count it, the sequence afterwards where he's having to sit with that as well, but mostly him frantically trying to stop the plane from crashing.
Yeah, I think it's either that or the yippee-ki-yay and the that set piece itself, because that is also pretty excellent. But I'd probably agree it's that one. It's just got the most raw emotion in it out of the whole movie. It feels like it hits a bit harder.
I mean, the naked yoga at the beginning also top tier.
Yoga hard.
I'm sure that there was some 90s like discount yoga series that had that title. I do not doubt it.
All right, MVP.
I mean, just by process of elimination, there's nobody who's earned it anywhere close as much as John. As much as, like, I would love to give it to Dickless to say, like, oh, he was fun the whole way through. I would love to say Al showing up for his one scene was great. I don't think any character who had enough screen time for me to justify them getting MVP earned it. besides John McClane. So I'm just going to give to him as a default, pretty much.
Yeah, no, it's John McClane. There's no other way around it, really, for this one. So that is also my pick. Which leads us to simply rating Die Hard 2 out of 10.
That is tougher for me. It is still a very well done movie. I don't think, in terms of the grand scale of what movies can be, I think if I saw this in the theaters, I wouldn't be walking out disappointed. I think that there is still a good amount to it that makes it a solid movie, but just critically looking back on it, and especially comparing to the first ones, it is lacking severely. So I think all in all, I'm probably going to end up at a 7.5, just shy of that 8 being great mark. I think that it is very well done. It is, a solid movie, but I think that it's just not quite great. I think I was just engaged with it because of the silliness and like over the topness of it, rather than it being a solidly written and great movie in its own right.
Yeah, here's a tough one to rate. I feel like I've bounced around different numbers for as long as I've been rating movies on Die Hard 2, and I think where I'm ultimately going to land is a 6.5.
Okay.
And I think because I don't think I can outright just say it's a good movie. I think it has a lot of good things in it. It has good scenes in it. It has good moments. It has characters I like. Most of the characters I like came from the first one, admittedly, but still, like it's got a lot of solid things in it. But ultimately, I do think it just falters a bit in actually making me care about what the villains are actually doing, and the more personal stakes involved, kind of thing.
Right.
And it's just a big thing. There's just enough things that I don't like that much. Like the villains I don't like. I think there's a stretch of time when Grant and his men show up until they reveal to be bad guys. I just don't. I think that little 10-15 minute chunk just feels like a chore to get through. And I think part of it is just because at that point John McClane's had to deal with the chain of command and being shut out of whatever's going on so many times in the movie that having a new set of people to say no, you don't get to be involved. At that point, I'm just done with it. I'm just I'm sick of this plot point. That's just we could have spent 15 minutes developing his relationship to Barnes to make me care more about because that's the thing. As much as Barnes is probably the character that he gets the closest to in the airport, it never feels like it's never anything compared to him and Al in the first one.
Yeah, like if
no
if they shared that look between each other at the end that Al had in the first movie, I would have rolled my eyes. I'd be like, you didn't earn this. You didn't earn this at all.
Absolutely. I guess what they did instead is have the guy that he hated sort of come around and say, Merry Christmas, your parking ticket's been evaporated. Bye-bye. Right.
Which honestly just felt more like less of them getting a compadre between each other and more like the cop realizing, oh, wait, maybe I should trust the guy who's already dealt with terrorists.
Yeah, so... Yeah, 6.5, I think, is what I land on. I still enjoy watching it. I'm never mad to watch Die Hard 2 when I do a watch of 1, 2, and 3, which is typically what I would do. Which is not to say that I hate 4 by any means. I've just never went back and watched 4 again. I'm actually very curious to see how I feel about 4 when we watch it, because especially now that it's almost 20 years old, which, by the way, makes me feel ancient.
Yes.
I was 18 when Die Hard 4 came out.
I remember ads for it. I don't remember what age I guess I would have been 15.
I had just finished high school, because I finished high school in May of 2007 and it came out that summer.
Gotcha.
So
fair enough. Well,
anyway,
before we move on, does it make the cut? I think this is one of those tough ones. I could see the argument for making the cut and cutting it close. I think it's right straddling that line.
I think it's cutting it close. I think if you look at it from the point of view, if 1 and 3 is going to be in the collection, yes, it kind of just defaults to being in there with them. But on its own, I would say no. It's cutting it close.
In fairness, I don't know how I feel about 3 yet, but I'm willing to accept that you're saying it's good. So yeah, I'll go ahead and say cutting it close. I'll agree with that. I don't have any problem putting it there, but I do think it is right on the upper echelon of it.
Yeah, I just, keep in mind, I rated the first one a 10. I gave this one a 6.5. That is a reasonably sized drop, even though it's not into the negatives. So,
that's fair.
I still appreciate a lot of it. I still like watching it. It's just, But some of my enjoyment is a little bit of nostalgia because I have grown up with this one too. So it kind of that sugarcoats a little bit of the rough edges that aren't as good. So
yeah.
Hey, but anyway, obviously next time we will be hitting you with Die Hard with a Vengeance. It's not Christmas anymore, guys.
Well, I mean, we didn't even say that. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I guess we could say that next week, but Merry Christmas at least.
Merry America. I guess this is close to Christmas, this episode.
Yeah, it's the closer we're going to get.
Yeah. So we'll see you for Die Hard with a Vengeance next time. And yeah, we'll see how a script that was originally for something else entirely became a Die Hard movie and how it worked out all right.
I mean, I did notice that, the first Die Hard movie was based off a book. This one was also based off of a book. And then the next one was a totally separate script. So continuing on the tradition of Die Hard movies having nothing to do with John McClane until it hits the screens.
Yeah, because the third one was literally just a script called Simon Says that then worked into being a Die Hard movie. So we'll see how that all turned out next time. But let us know what you thought of Die Hard 2 in the comments below. Of course, you can support the show and all the other shows that are on MailFuzz movies, such as Screams After Midnight and the Atomic Cinema Experiment, by supporting us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or you can do a YouTube membership if that's more your thing. But you get access to bonus content, and specifically for me and David, there's 2 monthly bonus shows. One is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. So the upper echelon of quality, the kino, if you will, as the hipster kids would say. And then
yeah.
And then at the $5 and up tier, you also get access to extra reels where we review some of the worst things ever made, including, to tie into Die Hard season, a Die Hard ripoff called Skyscraper. So if that sounds like a fun time, and you can find the movie on YouTube for free, by the way. So
that's our Christmas gift to you.
So you can enjoy such a thing. In fact, this should be out this week. Yeah, it's the same week this comes out. Same day. Yeah.
Yep.
So
I do want to. A little behind the scenes thing. I won't spoil what the movie is, but Peter just today told me that an extra reels was being moved onto one of the main shows. So that means now not only do we have to fill that extra reel slot, but I still have to do that movie. So great choices being made behind the scenes here.
Yes, excellent choices. Logical choices that are fulfilling and give our life meaning. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Great.
This has been the Collector's Cut. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.